Hi, this is Sherry Seiler. I'm the teen librarian over at the Bucyrus Public Library, and today we're going to talk about own voices. There's a lot of talk about books that are in the own voices category. This is a movement where we match authors to the actual subject matter or the protagonist. A lot of this, it started some time ago, and there's been a lot of talk on how it's kind of made the YA literature a little tougher, and in some cases it should be. I mean, in terms of diversity, yeah, we'd love to hear stories about diverse protagonists by diverse authors. So we're basically trying to match marginalized groups, but at the same time there's also been a lot of talk about how that has kind of scrunched the artistic drive of some of those authors, whether they are from a marginalized group or not from a marginalized group. One of these things can be summed up by, there's an article by Kat Rosenfield back in 2019, and she writes about Kosovo Jackson. He's an author of young adult fiction, and he had written a tweet that, the civil rights movement should be written by black people, stories about suffrage should be written about women, and stories about boys during horrific and life-changing times like the AIDS epidemic should be written by gay men. Okay, how is that so hard? This is what he wrote. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon going, yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right. Okay, his book was turned down. He said it in war-torn, in a war-torn 1990s Kosovo, and well, he's not from there. So then they were like, well, you need to put it in a different place. So now, they're trying to police everything about the book. And he said, yeah, okay, maybe I was wrong. But since then, he said he's going to get out of YA literature. So are we pushing some really great authors or great stories away? And that's kind of a question. The other part is, are we pushing readers away? And that's where I get a little worried, because I have some really great books that are own voices. And people get turned off by this own voices. Oh, well, I don't want to read about someone that's, I'm not going to identify with the character. Well, if they didn't tell you who the character was at all, you would eventually identify with them. I like to read science fiction. I like to read fantasy. I'm not a dwarf. Okay, I'm short, but I'm not a dwarf. I'm not a half-elf. Love those stories. Did not need to be a half-elf in order to enjoy it. They don't have to be a gladiator-type warrior to enjoy that type of story. So some of these arguments about I'm not going to enjoy the story. All right, so let's talk about a few own voices books. Okay, this is Long Way Down. I got to figure where the camera is. Not get it. Long Way Down. And this is by Jason Reynolds. It's a book in verse. Some people will be turned off because it's a book in verse. Don't be. Definitely read this book. I read it probably in about an hour, 2, maybe at the most, and it was awesome. It's an awesome story. They did make a movie out of it. Did not see it, but I did read the book. And honestly, it's the book in itself. When I'm reading it, it's almost like film noir. I can see it being set as a Twilight Zone episode. It's just so compact with so many emotions. And I didn't have to live in the area or have these type of experiences to understand them. All right. So then we also have, let's talk about American Panda. There we go. American Panda. This is a story. Well, she's Korean, and her parents, of course, want her to marry a nice Korean, but she's American. And Korean American, and her parents expect her to settle down with a nice Korean boy after she gets her doctorate in college, and she had skipped a grade. She was so smart, she skipped a grade, and she's off to an Ivy League school to get her doctorate, and and she doesn't really want to tell her parents that She doesn't like medicine. She's not really interested in that. And as for settling down with a nice Korean guy, is that all she's left with? Does she has to pick from that? What if she falls for somebody else? It's a fun book, though. It's not necessarily a rom-com. It's a good story, though. And you don't have to be Korean American to get involved in this book, to get involved in the character, to understand. She's a young American girl, just like a lot of other people. And yeah, sure, she has some different situations, but I've read ones with young American girls who, have a mental issue. Didn't have to have a mental issue in order to understand what was going through the head or the mind, or the emotions of the character, but it helped to understand maybe some of what some kids go through, the traumas or the trials. Okay, but it doesn't always have to be about trials and traumas either. So we have a lot of other ones okay, so I'm going to show you this one. It's a big reveal. All right, now I was going to have the first one, which is Children of Blood and Bone, and probably quite a few of you have heard of this book. Because I've had so many people come in and say, "Oh, you got that book? It's awesome. You really need to read it." Okay. I have the second book here because the first book's out, because it actually does circulate quite a bit. So here we have an own voices book, and that's fantasy. So we have fantasy, we have science fiction, we have realistic fiction, we have rom-coms, we have historical fiction. So just because it's own voices doesn't mean that you're not going to relate. Doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy the story. They've got mysteries. So don't not pick it up because it's own voices. Do not pick it up or take it out or read it because you don't think you're going to identify with that author. You don't know that until you start reading it. So that's sort of my take on it. Come in. I have a display on those. And pick out an own voices book. There are a lot of good, diverse authors who can really create a character and a story, and you can get really into it. It's one of the reasons why I loved science fiction and I loved fantasy. It's because it's out there. Those are aliens. You can understand a lot about what some movements are because it's talking about an alien culture instead of what's going on right here and now. It's like, well, that's on the news. I don't want to hear about it. But when you get it in a science fiction story, all of a sudden it's like, now it's a story. Okay, so that's my take. And all right, see you later next time. Bye.